ignition.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We are humans, not animals. Lizard people.
Every four computers now have primary control of critical vehicle function.
Was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Well, we've moved off to Israel, so we might as well move on to the next topic, since it kind of deals with that.
It does. This is, if you need to time me, because I've got a whole lot.
No, we are only 30 minutes in so far, and I'm cutting the first 5 minutes out, so we're only 25 minutes technically into this episode.
There you go.
So you're on.
Well, let me grab my notes real quick.
First thing, what's the title of this segment?
The Shemitah.
Shemitah.
Well, it's supposed to be
I will say that that's not at all how I would pronounce that. So
let me know how would you pronounce it?
I was saying Shemitah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's how it's written. That's what it looks like.
And I is from Indiana, so
yeah, and not just Indiana, Southern Indiana. So
I am not from Southern Indiana. You can calm down.
Well, I've got family from Kentucky, so I can say whatever I need. So it's more or less the mystery of the Shemitah. Jonathan Cahn is a huge proponent of this. The Shemitah. So I'll start by saying this, and this is not in my notes, but I definitely wanted to say this. So the Shemitah is it's one of 9 harbingers that Jonathan Cahn has seen in recent history. So there's 9 of them. One of them is called Shemitah. Shemitah is a law in Israel, and basically it means a release or a shaking. It means a letting go. So the Shemitah follows along Shabbat. Shabbat is a time of rest. Shabbat is your weekend. I heard a Jewish guy say a couple weeks ago, he was, a comedian. He was like, the Americans love Judaism, and they all laughed, and they're like, why? And he's like, because we gave them the weekend. You gave them Shabbat, and they call it the weekend. We call it Shabbat. Anyway, so Shemitah means release, shaking, or letting go. It's a 7-year cycle commanded in the Torah where the land rests, debts are released, and people let go of control. So what if the ancient commands of the Torah didn't just shape Israel, but what if it shapes world history? What if the whisper of the Shemitah, the cycle of release, is still rippling in the rise and fall of the nations? This is what Jonathan Cahn starts out with. And this cycle could still be ticking beneath the surface of history now. And I think it's 100% bulletproof, factual. You can determine what you want. So the Shemitah in modern history, there's a pattern. It doesn't really start in 1917. That's kind of where he picks it up at. It's obviously been going on for a millennia. But when Israel is removed from the land because they weren't keeping the Shabbat laws, Shemitah allowed the land to rest, and Shemitah allowed for that Shabbat to happen. So Shabbat is rest. That's why the Shemitah is so important. When you're not resting, then there's shaking coming. 1917 is the first shaking that he talks about. There's 4 empires that fall in 1914: Russia, Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Britain is in decline at this point. America rises as a global economic center. This is right after World War I. The Balfour Declaration promises land to Israel, the Jewish people, and they start making their aliyah, is what they call it, home to Israel. So a Shemitah year is a great release and a shaking of the old world. So from 1938 to 1945, there's War, Rise, and Fall. 1938, Hitler's rise begins. 1945, Axis powers come into play. Then there's a collapse in Germany and Japan, obviously, World War II. August 15th is the U.S. victory, which is right before Elul 29, September 7th, 1945. That's the end of the Shemitah year. And then in 1947, the UN votes for a Jewish state. So this is all very prophetic stuff happening because of the Shemitah.
Yeah.
So 1996 to 97, another Shemitah. Jubilee restored, World Trade Center groundbreaking. 1967, the Six Day War takes place. Jerusalem returns to Israel after 2,000 years. So imagine this: 1917 to 1967 is 50 years. Now, if you know anything about the counting of the Omer, if you know anything about Jewish holidays, if you know anything about the Shemitah year, 50 is Yovel. We would say Jubilee. So Yovel is a time to be joyous and jubilant. 1917 to 1967 is 50 years. That's 7 Shemitah cycles, which plus 1 year is a jubilee. So
Yeah.
the counting of the Omer. So from Pesach, the Passover, all the way to Pentecost. Our celebration is Pentecostals. Pentecost, there's 50 days there. That 50th day is when you would celebrate, the giving of the Torah, which is what we talked about earlier. So this is a mirror to the Shemitah years. Every 7 years you have a Shemitah year. Every 7 days you have a Shabbat, and every year you have a celebration of the giving of the law. And so
Yep.
this is why the world is the way that it is, because it was created for those things. Those are Moedim. Those are appointed times. There's times to rest. You don't work nonstop. You have to rest, America. You need to rest. So there's restoration, return, and divine timing. Moving on to 1973, a moral and economic shaking takes place. The World Trade Center is completed. And here's the big one: Roe versus Wade, the abortion is legalized. Bretton Woods is an economic system that collapses. Vietnam defeat takes place, and August 15th is another shaking. That's 4 Shemitahs after World War II. So the cycle continues again. So it doesn't mean that every Shemitah something is happening, and it also doesn't mean that the Shemitah is only focused on the United States, or that it can't be focused on other nations. But because the U.S. is the standing world power at the time and still now, these events are being recorded as this is why the Shemitah is doing what it's doing, right? It affects the entire world because it affects the U.S., because the U.S. was founded on Judeo-Christian values. So the value system of the Jews, when the Puritans came to the U.S. over Massachusetts. If you've ever been there, you know this. I've not been there, but I'd love to go. But there's different cities by the names of the different cities in Israel, and there, different events that were taking place that you couldn't walk too many steps on Shabbat, because that was a rule back then. This is 17th century America. That was a rule. You could not walk too many steps, or else you would be in violation of the Torah, and you were put in prison, or you were put in jail or holding,
Yeah.
because again, 17th century America. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's significance there. 2001, towers fall, markets crash. Moving forward, 9/11. Obviously, everybody knows what that is. The fall of the World Trade Center. September 17th is Elul 29. So right before the Shemitah, the towers fall. Elul 29 takes place. There's also a stock market crash because of 9/11.
Yep.
Shemitah's exact end. So the cycle climaxed a release of power, a fall. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have to go look back at my notes, but there's a section of Shemitahs that happened there as well. Let me go look at my notes real quick. So you can tell that all of this stuff is just, um, oops, that's wrong. All of this stuff is it's continual build up and then fall, and continue build up and then fall. Let me see here. 21. So between 1945 and 1973, there's 28 years. That's four Shemitahs. Four Shemitahs after 1973 is another 28 years. That's the climax of Shemitah and the fall of power. Um, and then you have '07 and '08, which there's a stock market downward crash. That's one Shemitah. The financial collapse is in fall of September or Elul 29, the Jewish calendar, on the Jewish calendar. So there's a lot to be said there about that. And that's where we have to start recognizing, like, even events in our modern times are being affected by Shemitah. Um, so, um, 2015, we'll keep, and by the way, this isn't just these events, it's also like Great Depression is part of this. Other events are a part of the Shemitah. It really affects a lot of different stuff. 2015, there's a global economic tremor. Markets tremble because of Shemitah's close in August 2015. There are warnings, but no collapse that's as severe, but there's still a downward trend, right? Here's another really big one, and this is another one that's just fascinating because, we look at our recent events and we think, it's just people being people, or it's just coincidence. Here's 2017, Jerusalem's return again. So this is 50 years from 1967. Remember what happens in 1967? Israel regains Jerusalem because of the Six-Day War, right? So 50 years since then. That's 49 years, and then 1 year, which would be 50. Jerusalem officially recognized as Israel's capital. The U.S. declares this, and obviously we know who that president was. That is a jubilee. It's a Yovel year. That has to do with the Shemitah. The pattern behind the curtain, is this coincidence or is it design? I believe it's design. Some people might have different ideology. There might even be, Israelis that don't necessarily agree with it. Maybe it's just coincidence. I don't think so, but this is me. I think it's an ancient rhythm given by the Torah that's still moving history. Empires rise, empires falls, as the Shemitah quietly ticks onward. So the story is this cycle is telling us if this is a pattern, if it's real, what might be next on the Shemitah. The next Shemitah happens at the end of 2028. So we are marching towards the next Shemitah. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot going on in 2025. There's a lot going on in 2025. So the Shemitah that is coming in a couple of years, probably going to be a significant Shemitah. And this is my final thought on the Shemitah. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Every modern history bows to the quiet rhythm of his time. So these are appointed times. These are things that God demanded and declared that we follow as his people. The problem is that we get so caught up in whether or not we feel like this is putting people under the law. Let me be very careful what I'm going to say here. If you're going to celebrate Christmas and you're going to tell people that if you don't celebrate Christmas, you're going to hell, that is putting someone under the law. If you're shouting over long skirts, long sleeves, long hair, short hair, no beards, if you're shouting over that stuff, that is putting people under the law, because the law is this: I have to do X, Y, and Z to make heaven. You do not get to choose that. It is by grace and only by grace. Now, works are good. Your faith should provoke you to good works, but your good works are not going to merit you into heaven. That is the grace of God that gets you there. So, are you wrong for doing good works? No. But you're wrong when you tell people, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that, to make heaven your home. Now, I believe in holiness standards. I believe in outward holiness standards. I believe in inward holiness standards. There are some people that don't put a lot of emphasis on outward holiness, and I understand that. Obviously, I believe in it, and I believe that it's a good thing. Men should look like men, women should look like women. That's something my wife and I practice. However, this is the thing: when it becomes more about what you're wearing, your church attendance, how much you're giving the church, what you're doing at the church, and you stop remembering that you are a sinner just like everybody else is a sinner, and that you will get into heaven because of your good deeds and because of your tenure, you are now under the law, because it's no different than you taking a ram, a lamb, or a bullock and taking it to the altar and sacrificing it, because that's exactly what Israel was trying to do. They were getting into heaven because of their works, not because of grace. Well, you have grace now. So when you fall, rely on Yeshua, Jesus, to bring you out of the turmoil and out of the darkness and set you in his light. His light is love. His light is peace and joy. And we have to get this. You cannot get into heaven because of your skirt. You cannot get into heaven because of your pants. How can you get into heaven? Because of the grace of Jesus Christ. Your faith is accounted as righteousness, and your faith should move you to do good works, not that your good works will get you into heaven. And so, me celebrating a Jewish feast or a Christian feast, or other holidays, 4th of July, Veterans Day, that is not getting me into heaven. Just like, and this is another thing that Christians argue with in the U.S., which is just insane. Your political persuasion is not getting you into heaven, whether you are on the left or the right. Neither one of them are right. Arguably, Jesus would not have known what a Republican even is. And no, he did not wear a "Make America Great" shirt again. He did not wear that. He wore a talit, and if you don't know what that is, you can go look that up. But he wore one of those, and it was very Jewish, and he was definitely more of a Pharisee than anything. But he did not know what American politics were. He did not drive a Prius. He didn't wear. He might have wore sandals, but that's beside the point. But he didn't have a Starbucks T-shirt.
They all wore sandals.
Yeah, there's a lot of sandal wearing back then. But the point that I'm trying to make is, works does not get you into heaven. The grace of God gets you into heaven, and only His grace. And so, give people the benefit of the doubt and forgive them when they fall. Forgive Michael Tate. Michael Tate, hey man, I forgive you. We all make mistakes. Welcome to the party of being a sinner. I'll be your host. Welcome to the planet. Nobody here is without mistakes. Yes. Even El Pope has mistakes. He's not a holy man. No, there's no holy man. Not even the high priest in Israel is holy. And there still needs to be atonement for every person. And that's where the church needs to understand that these Moedim are important. The Shemitah is obviously very important. Shabbat is very important. It's not required that you follow these things clearly. It's not required. But it's a good thing that you would follow. If you did follow them, it would be a good thing. But if you didn't, oh well. It's just as good as you celebrating Christmas and giving your kids gifts. By the way, Jewish families give their kids gifts too on Christmas, because they have to figure out how to, hey, he's getting gifts every day. This guy only gets so many gifts. So some Jewish families do that, and that's totally okay. It's not. It doesn't diminish the feast at all. It doesn't make it. I mean, you don't have to do those things, but kids want to know, like, why is this guy getting gifts and I don't get any gifts? But birthdays, anniversaries, those aren't in the Bible. I'd love to see when people celebrate those. You get a birthday weekend and a birthday month, But we argue about the Moedim. We argue about these appointed times. They're biblical. And arguably, if you want to go back and test me on this, go back in the Bible and see, what does God call them? He calls them the feasts of Adonai, the feasts of the Lord. That means they are continually there. They're continually important. Now, Do you have to follow them in order to make heaven? Absolutely not. There's probably people who didn't follow them in the past who died, probably going to be in heaven, because he gets to choose who goes to heaven. Because guess what? This goes back to one of our old podcasts. He is in control. You're not going anywhere outside of what the Creator tells you to do. That's why he's called the Creator, because he decides what it is that you do. The clock creator told the clock, make time. Do the time thing. And the clock cannot step out of its side of itself and become a zebra, you know. But we as humanity, we want to be something different. I know, I'm going off on a tangent here. But the clock can't look out the window and say, "Oh man, I'd love to be a tree." You were created to be a clock. You can't be a tree. You know. So
Yep.
humans, you're created to worship Adonai. You're created to visit the Lord on an appointed day. It doesn't necessarily have to be Shabbat, but Shabbat is holy. It would be a great time if you did, but you don't have to. If Sunday works for you, then that's your Sabbath, and praise God. I know that's what we do. There's nothing wrong with celebrating though. If you want it to be Tuesday afternoon, it can be Tuesday afternoon. But you spend 24 hours of time away from it, away from the world, away from work. You allow the Shemitah to take place. You allow the rest to take place. Nothing because that time is a sacred time to help you understand you're not created to create things and to work and to never have a break. That is a time of a breaking, of a resting, and it happens once a week. It happens once a week, and then it happens yearly, and then it happens every 50 years. There is a resting, and if the U.S. could get that, I think the U.S. would totally see some changes and shifts because again, we make this thing, and this is the last thing I'll say because I know you guys probably want to say something about Shemitah, or if you have questions, but this last thing I want to say, it is not about Judaism. This is not about Judaism. This is about the God that created Judaism.
Mhm.
Who is that God? That is the God of the Old Testament. That God robed himself in flesh, came as the Son of God. He called himself Jesus, Yeshua. He became a man and he died for the sins of the world because God is a man and a real man takes care of issues for his children. He does not make his children
Yep.
take care of his issues. There's only one God, and his name is Yeshua. So there you have it. That's my final thought. That's the Shemitah, though. There's so much more. There's not enough time to explain it all. But so, questions, comments, or concerns?
Yeah. Not really related to Shemitah, but he said a clock can't become a tree, but a tree could become a clock. So
Yeah, that's true. Well, that actually has something different to do because when you think about different aspects of creation, God actually wants to partner with humanity to become creators. So there is an aspect. There's nothing wrong with you becoming a creator. Whether you're making an item for people to use, or you're some other kind of creator. God wants to partner with you and allow you to become that creator. But what God is doing, like for instance, bread is the one element that you can break down and you can create it into something totally different from what its original state is. And trees are exactly the same. There's actually some deep connections with trees and the Torah, and obviously the book is called the Tree of Life. So that there's a whole connection there too. Trees are super cool.
mhm.
Troy, you got any comments, concerns, or questions?
Nope. There's a lot of good information in that. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
when I googled that, it came up with just the basic 7 years you let everything rest thing. I didn't get any of the conspiracies, not really conspiracy, but any of the factual things of what happens
Yeah.
every time
Well,
one's happened in the last 50 years. But
yeah. The interesting thing is, I mean, it could just be a coincidence. So I'm not saying that. Personally, I don't think that it is. I don't think it's a coincidence
I don't
because
believe in coincidences
I
around
don't.
here.
Yeah, I don't either. Because it happens so like boom, boom, boom. The event after event after event after event, and if you look at it from a global scale and you just look at timelines and the things that happen, like major events that happen around the world, every 7 years something crazy takes place. Even COVID happens like right after Shemitah. So it's still going on. The new presidential things happen because of Shemitahs, and wars take place because of Shemitahs, and it basically is the Shemitah. The creator is going to get what the creator wants. You can either fight against the creator or you can do what he's asking you to and partner with him. But either way, he's going to get what he wants. So you're either, if you're a clock, you're either going to tell time or you're going to tell time. Or you're going to sit there and not tell time, but you'll be a broken clock, but you'll still be a clock. You're not going to be anything else. If you're a pool, you're going to be a pool because you were created to be a pool, and you're going to hold water whether you want to hold water or not. Nobody asked you what you wanted to be. I find it interesting. We like to argue what the Bible says, but if we just took for what the Bible says, the Creator didn't ask us whether or not, he didn't ask like, "Hey, Leo, what do you think about a Shemitah?" He just put it in there. He didn't ask me what I thought about male and female. He made male and female, and that's what he made. He never asked me, "Hey, Alex, do you think male and female is good? You think we need more or less, or maybe there should be 50?" No, no, no. He said there's two, male and female. That's something I heard a preacher say one time is like, God didn't ask us. He just did what he wanted us to do. And there it was. You know what I mean? He didn't ask me if lungs was a good idea. He didn't ask me if eyeballs would be how we should see, or if we should, thumb around in the dark the whole time. He started creating things, and then things became because he created those things. So a lot of times, we look at, but the issue all goes down to control. I want to be in control. I'd like to be the one that says, this is the way things should be. God never asked me. I'm angry about it. Well, he's the creator. If he wanted to ask you, he would have, but he didn't. You know what I mean? And sure, there are some things where he can partner with us, absolutely. But with the overarching things like trees and grass and oxygen, he didn't, and gravity. He didn't really ask us about that stuff. He just created that because he saw that it was good.
Very, very good.
Absolutely. So the Shemitah, like I said, is super, super cool. There's so much more to it. So I'll just give this plug in here as well. Jonathan Kahn, Messianic rabbi from New Jersey, goes around the country, does a lot of preaching. That guy wrote a book called The Mystery of the Shemitah. I'm currently reading it. I was trying to get through it before today, but I still have a couple hours left. Anyway, great book. If anyone is looking for a good book to read based on Yovel, Jewish feasts, or just understanding how the Bible affects current events, the Shemitah is a good start. You can definitely go to the Shemitah, read it. The Mystery of the Shemitah is really good. And it's an audiobook, so I like it even more because audiobooks are my lane, and I can listen to it while I drive for hours and hours and hours.